Today, I'd like to talk about Merpay's QA policy. So, through DevDojo, we talk about how Merpay does QA and what this concept of quality assurance for all is. My name is Masami Yajiri. My Slack name is M. Yajiri. This is my fourth year in Merpay. I joined Merpay in 2019. And in the beginning, I was a QA in the credit design team. And now I'm in the code payment as well as the net payment or online payment system QA lead. I ru- I help with these sessions as well as running the intern program. I like endurance related sports like marathon running, trail running, and on the weekends I like to go to onsen hot springs. Before I was a QA engineer, I used to do pre-sales and consultant work before being a QA engineer, and actually, even before that, 7 years, I actually worked at as a Shinto priest. I know that this is kind of an unusual path, but with some interesting turns in life, I ended up working in QA. So first of all, I'd like to talk about what the goals of our QA policy is. At Merpay, our mission is building trust for a seamless society. You may have heard of this before already. So at the time Merpay was established, Suzuki, who was one of the outside directors, as also he established Smart News. These were this is a concept that came from his some of his writing. And so, if we summarize this, essentially, a seamless society is one where the world is allowed to stay complicated, but in which people can live connected. And so, this connects to Mayor Pay's mission as well. However, when society's safety and security is threatened, then society usually responds by being more simplified and creating new borders. So, in order to create a truly seamless society, we essentially need to fight against anything that would threaten our safety and security, and I think that's part of what doing QA is. And so, in order to do so, or to fight against the things that would threaten our safety and security, what we want to achieve through agile QA is to allow QA to be the glue that holds teams together. QA doing everything for the sake of quality and value, and making sure that QA can create dialogue with teams. Uh, Across product as well as projects. So not only do they test projects or products, we would like for everybody to have QA members be involved in every aspect of product development. We talked about being experts in quality assurance, but what exactly is quality? If you ask QA engineers, generally they will respond that it is quality is value to some person. This is a phrase that was defined or you coined or used by Gerard Weinberg, and I think a lot of QA engineers use this phrase. And within projects that constantly change, it's important that we understand value as something or quality as something that is valuable to our customers and users. So we have this phrase called QA for everyone that we often use within Marpay. Marpay was established in 2019. In February, we started launching our product, and through that we've cycled through creating product as well as releasing, and I think through that process we've been able to refine our product, but at the same time we've seen that knowledge as well as skill tends to get siloed within individual team or division, making it difficult to collaborate or connect across teams. And so we would call this state siloed, and in order to resolve this siloed state, It's important for all engineers, all people involved to focus on the value that we want to provide through our product and work together in a collaborative way so that we can maintain this value. In 2022, Merpay has shifted to a journey-based organization structure, and I believe that is part of reducing this siloed state. Next, I'd like to talk about something called Lusser's law. So let's say there is an airplane with 10 components. And if each component is at about 90% in terms of quality, if each component has at least 90% in terms of quality, you'd assume that the item, the final product would not be so bad. However, if you combine 10 components that are 90% in terms of quality, and if you add this into the formula, you'll actually get a 35% assurance rate. And so actually, if it's an airplane, it might fall out of the sky. So even at the component level, it's important for us to aim for the highest quality possible in order to create a product that's reliable. Next, I'd like to talk about agile testing and what testing should look like within this. Let me share something called the testing manifesto. These are important points or some fundamental principles when thinking about agile testing. For those who are used to it, it might be hard to think about or remember what it actually looked like before agile testing was introduced. But if you think about things from the opposite end, you might be able to remember what testing used to look like. In the past, I think that testing often happened at the end of a delivery cycle. So testing happened right before a release was supposed to happen. So it was the final step. However, when there's a deficiency that is found right before their release, it's possible that you may need to delay the schedule. At the, at the same time, if a error or deficiency was found earlier, and at an earlier stage, then we may have not had to actually make changes to the schedule. So it's important to find these issues early as possible. I think in the past, we also had a tendency to try to find as many bugs as possible, regardless of priority. Of course, it's not a good thing to find bugs, or having bugs is not good, but looking for bugs for the sake of looking for bugs and trying to find as many as possible is not very productive. Rather than finding bugs, it's important to prevent bugs from being created to begin with. In addition, there's no need to destroy the system in order to find an error or a deficiency. Of course, durability of the system itself is important, but the product team should focus on how it's supposed to deliver value to its customers. The fourth point is users tend to not use or read instructions when using our product. The most important thing is to actually use the product and see if what the experience for a user would look like. Is it the best experience we could deliver to our users as possible, and look at things from that perspective. And finally, even if we do our best and an incident happens, we don't want to hold people responsible that are there at the time. It's important to do a retrospective as a team and understand where we went wrong and to improve together. This is shows sort of the DevOps process, but regarding this idea of continuing to test, I'd like to touch upon that further. So I'd like to say essentially that testing should not only be for the product. In the past, testing tended to be for code as well as components, things that had ended up being the output in part as part of the product. However, waiting to test final actions is quite unproductive because the delivery process has become quite tighter in comparison to before. So we need to continue to test. By continuing to test even after release, we may be able to actually find bugs or issues before it actually reaches our users. In addition, it's important to continue to look at our users' feedback as well as actions in order to create the best product possible. I talked about the most essential parts about agile testing to this point, but next I'd like to talk about testing as well as what it means to maintain quality. For Merpay's QA, we want to make sure that we test as much as possible or have sufficient testing before release. The first point being, we want to make sure that there are no deficiencies that would create a huge incident. The second, that we can create value with what we have. The third being that the product value should exceed the residual risk. And then gains from a timely release would exceed damage from a delayed release. Of course, even if we're testing, it is concerning when you release. But if we are able to cover all of these components, I think we can be excited about a release. Even those who are not related to QA directly, I think it's important to think about what is necessary through testing before release. Next, I'd like to talk about tests that is very important for quality assurance. We just say testing in general, but it actually covers a lot of components. So rather than testing the function, we want to test for value. So generally speaking, testing refers to making sure something works according to requirements and specification, but it doesn't end there. It can be categorized as an activity of learning and exploring in order to confront the product in operation. So activities that confirm that the product works would be considered checks. And it's important to do so efficiently in order to see if the actions are working as predicted. In order to maximize this quality, Merpay developers also write code for unit tests and E2E tests. And these are per checks because it's better to automate and streamline what's possible. On the other hand, exploratory testing focuses on value and whether it's a good experience for the user. So while touching or actually using the program, we get an idea and confirm the reliability of the item or the product. And through these two types of tests, we can say that we've actually been able to test things sufficiently. And I think it's important to be aware of these two perspectives when we say test in order to improve the accuracy of our quality assurance. Next, I'd like to talk about this idea of value as well as risk. You may have heard of these phrases, ordinary or must be quality, as well as uh, testing that is attractive. This is part of the Kano model. But for example, we would say that incidents would be a downside risk. And let's say A/B tests or dog food, we do that before the release. But we may find out the feedback after release and see the negative and positive comments and use that as a way to measure our upsides or the value. All of these ideas are important for not only QA, but for PMs as well as product engineers to consider when creating a product. Next, I've created a simple chart here to show value as well as risk. Upsides and downsides tend to be for the financial terms. Downside is essentially if uh, there are downsides, as well as upsides is if we are able to actually create profit. So up to this point, this is what Agile QA is like within Merpay.
Well, lastly, the test automation strategy. So this is a test pyramid. On the right pyramid is the ROI, high ROI. So test automation, usually we will do E2E to automate the UI test. I think that is the usual way. But also we want to do unit test, service level test, API component test, and also UI test, the equi test. So it's been broken down into three. So at Merpay, engineers write the test code frequently. The next is development methods. Scrum type is pretty common, and depending on the stakeholders or the project, sometimes we also adopt a waterfall type. So for these two development methods, I would like to explain how the test relates to these different types. So on the right, we have the agile test. The development process, we have various tests, and we will look at whether it's business side or it's a technical heavy thing. So we need to support the test, like for example, unit test or component test. There are several test levels that are written here, depending on which quadrant we fall into. So post run and scenario test. We call it scenario go with it internally, and we use these to do automated tests. Some are hybrid, manual and automated. We also do regression tests before the release. For the client unit test, we have for iOS, we have the CVS test. For Android, we have the Espresso. Other than that, we also have ad hoc tests. For those, we do manual tests. We also do use a specific tool to look at certain other tests. So we also do a different test process for waterfall type. And this part here that's highlighted is more towards automated tests. And we make sure we do frequent reviews to make sure that the quality is being maintained. So about pay and QA policy, that was the presentation that I just did. And thank you everyone for listening to my presentation.